Let's go. Hey, 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 yo. Come on. Hey, 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 yo. Oh, yeah. Hey, 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 yo.
Welcome, everyone, to the Fantastic Inside of Baseball podcast. There's a lot of things to click to get this show started. Sky.
A couple.
There's more than a couple. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm always happy that you're in charge, and I just sit here and wait for you to do what you got to do.
Yeah, and we're not going to talk. We were just talking right before we went on to start the podcast here. We're not going to talk about your Tout Wars auction today. We'll do it in the episode this weekend in a couple days coming up, because I'm a little pissed off that you talked with the guys from CBS before you talked to me about it. You were in the same league, so you had to do it, right?
Their schedules are a little more flexible than yours and mine.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, it's a full-time gig for them, so I totally get it. But, trying to pigeonhole you and I into 45 minutes somewhere here and there.
Did you tell Chris Towers from CBS that
I did.
Yeah.
Yep. I told him you said hey, and he said hey back. So,
all right,
yeah.
Nice.
He's a great guy. Really nice guy.
I like him. Get his emails every day. I like the way he writes, and I just enjoy it. That's one of the few things that I'm getting it every day, just like we do at Fantastics for subscribers, getting the notes every day. And Chris is good. I like him.
He's great. Frank Stanfield's great too. And by the way, Sandro says hello also.
Who did?
Sandro.
Okay. All right. Excellent.
Yeah, I ran into him too.
All the great people at Sirius
over the
years.
It was so cool. Everybody there is just a cool person, pretty much.
Everybody's very cool, and I've got producers from Sirius that you do too, longtime friends that we've known forever. Back when they were single, before they had kids.
Exactly, when they had time.
When they had time. No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
All right. So last week on the show, we talked about players that the draft advisory program ranked a little bit higher than ADP in FDP. It was a little bit higher. In other words, they thought their value was a little higher than they've been drafted. So today we're going to talk about players who the draft advisory program thinks should be drafted a little bit later than they're being drafted. Mm-hmm. And we mentioned this last week. The draft advisory program is largely computer model. We start to influence it as we get into the season, and news floats starts to influence the projections as well. But it's computer model, and you and I dig into this stuff a lot, and we like the draft advisory program because it gives us a voice of reason to kind of balance our analysis against, right?
Without question, yeah. But it has its, I don't want to say blind spots, but it has its biases as well. I mean, there are certain positions that are perpetually panned by the software, namely catcher and relief pitching. You have to jump away from the software if you want them earlier. So It's just one of the things to consider all the time when you're looking at it.
Well, the main proprietary advantage of the software at the beginning, the first 100 picks or so, is what we call VAM, value against mean. And it's basically allows you to compare, say, starting pitchers and outfielders for a draft pick early in the round. Instead of comparing them statistically, it gives you an idea of what their value is against others at their positions, so that you can see if a guy's more valuable. Again, comparing outfielders and starting pitching, which is challenging in the first few picks of an auction draft, of a snake draft or a regular draft pick. And in the auction, it's always challenging trying to balance your need for an outfielder versus a starting pitcher, say, although roster, your whole economy comes into it at some point. What your roster construction is, what your needs are, what you've bought so far, what you've drafted so far will influence that as well.
Oh, without question. Yeah. And actually, I think this is a helpful little discussion primer here, because there are things that you notice when you go through repeated drafts and repeated auctions with this. And a couple of those things will become apparent to people today, and probably from our last show too, is that we view outfield as a little bit weaker than a lot of people do. I think I was looking earlier, like outfielder number 60 is, let me go back down here, is Matt Wallner. Like, do you want Matt Wallner, a platoon bat, as a starting outfielder in a 12-team league? I don't think that you do. So It pushes a lot of those rank 20 to 50 outfielders. It pushes them up in the value, wanting you to get your outfield filled a little bit before number 60 comes around. And conversely, starting pitching, it views that kind of middle tier starting pitching as very, very deep. So it has a lot of those pitchers kind of depressed in value, because it feels like, you could pick any one of these 40 pitchers and have sort of relatively similar ceilings and floors with them. So why push them up the board? There's 10 more guys you could take that are sort of interchangeable. Do something else, like grab another outfielder.
Well, there's several ways that it ranks players, and it ranks players by FDP, which is where the program thinks he would be drafted in a vacuum. And it's inflation auction value. And what's the other auction value? on a draft advisory program?
You've got the
estimated inflated
auction value, yeah, and the inflated auction value.
Yeah, and basically what that is the economy changes as you go through the draft. With an auction, that's pretty obvious. You have so much money to spend, and you spend so much money, and you buy certain categories and certain statistics and certain positions. So the economy is going to change on all those things, and the inflation auction value reflects that dynamically. And I use that once I get past, say, the first 100 picks in the draft as a more of a ranking system than VAM, for example, because again, I'm starting to play towards my roster needs and my roster holes and what I need at this point. The outfield thing that's interesting, and I'm glad we brought up this discussion, because what I'm finding in the outfield this year, and it started last year as well, and we've been talking about it for a couple of years on the show, is that balance between speed and power. Because you need to draft speed, and you need speed multiple times. You can't take that top guy and just say, all right, I'm done with speed. I got a 40 stolen base guy. I'm done. You need speed throughout the draft, especially in the outfield. And then at a certain point, I keep finding myself in a position, maybe I need a little bit of power in here. Maybe I need a couple home runs, and I need a couple RBIs, and I need runs. Runs relate more to homers than they do to speed. We consider it a speed column, but it's more of a home run column. Generally speaking, Michael Waldo came up with that a couple of years ago, and we've been working with that. So that's the interesting thing for me in the outfield, the dynamic in the outfield. And that's where Wallner, that's where a guy like Wallner becomes interesting. And that's when we're talking about the draft value before a pick is made in a draft advisory program. It's going to change as picks come off the board, speed comes off the board, power comes off the board, outfielders come off the board. That valuation is going to change a little bit.
Oh, definitely. And I have nothing against Matt Wallner. I think he's a great player. The problem is that he's probably only going to get 400 to 450 plate appearances optimally if he doesn't get hurt. So do you want a 2/3 to 3/4 time player as a starter on your team, especially with weekly formats? I mean, you got a lot to juggle there. So I just feel like, outfield does get thin so quickly that I'm really pushing outfielders up my board. And I really end up with fairly weak second and third baseman a lot, because those are the things that I'm pushing down, because I view the middle tier at that position a little bit deeper. I'm ending up with Joey Ortiz all over the place.
Yeah.
Because he's just like not drafted, and he's an excellent contact bat with a little bit of power and some speed. He should be fine. And I can get him in around 20 or whatever. So
how are you balancing how are you drafting the outfield in general at this point? What are you trying to build with your outfield and that balance of power and speed?
I'm drafting James Wood in every single league, apparently. It just feels like that he's just always there right when it's time for me to pick my second or third outfielder. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, he's good. Yeah. And if you watched him this spring, he could be a 40-40 guy. He is impressive.
Well, if you're slotting him and he's your second or third outfielder, that's really good value right there.
I love it. And I think I actually got him in tout again. And I was like, wow, I really have him in 8 leagues. And I got him for 14.
He's your guy this year. That's a good price. He
is my guy this year. I got Carroll at 35 and Duran at 27. I had Duran last year at 4. Yeah. But I ended up with well over 300 stolen bases, which are not super valuable in a points league. But it's just how it kind of played out. I mean, those guys, like I got Ellie De La Cruz. I never get Ellie De La Cruz.
Yeah.
But I thought the value was good. And it was weird. Like all the guys that I really like and think are going to outperform, apparently everyone else did as well. Or maybe it was just bias on the fact that I won last year. So as soon as I bid, everybody jumps in and starts bidding. It was weird. Like every guy I really like went so far above value that I just let him go.
I don't know. These tout guys, generally speaking, are their own animal. They're not really thinking about what else is going on.
I wouldn't have thought so either. Yeah. But did Jason Dominguez going for like 18? I got Wood for less than Dominguez went for.
That's wild.
And I had a lot of money at the end too, so I could have kept pushing. But at a certain point, I need 6 more players and I have $40. Like, I just can't justify paying $20 for Jason Dominguez. I mean, he's still unformed as a player.
These guys shouldn't be buying that hype, right? It's not that Dominguez might not have a good season, and you're a Yankees guy too, so you would know more than some. But that's a lot of money to pay for an unknown at this point.
I'm a horrendous poker player. You pretty much know. I'm just going to bludgeon you. I always have money at the end of the draft, so if I really want a guy, I'm just going to beat you up and take him. I don't mince words. I don't hem and haw and pretend to wait or whatever. Like if I'm going to bid, I bid. Yep. And I think people see that and they know me at this point. It's been 3 years. So if they see me bid pretty quickly and aggressively, they're just going to keep pushing them up to try to price and force, which is fine. And I ended up with $12 left at the end, which I never, ever, that's a cardinal sin.
Yeah, I know, right?
My last couple players, like it was down to either Dominguez or Lars Nootbaar in the outfield. And Dominguez went up to 18. I was like, this is just stupid. I'm not taking him. I still need another pitcher and a utility and another catcher. I might need some money. So I go on Newt Bar and I bid quick and he $4 and just stopped. And I was like, okay. I mean, I
Yeah.
sort of view those two guys as relatively equal in value, and one goes $15 more.
Well, that's where the clinical vision comes into play a little bit more, because you're going to look at those guys clinically as player A and player B and see, like you said, similar value,
Yeah.
but there's hype and there's price and there's market involved in this.
And there's Yankees,
and
because
there's-
there are, including me, there are 4 Yankee fans in that draft.
Yeah.
Because Govier sent a proxy, and then Joe Galena is a huge Yankee fan from Staten Island, and Chris Torres is in there this year. He was sitting next to me. He's a Yankee fan. So it's like our whole corner, 4 straight guys were Yankee fans. So every time I brought up a Yankee, I just didn't get them.
Well, who wants Newt Bar? Nobody wants Newt Bar. They all want Dominguez. If you got your choice of the two, everyone wants the kid, right?
Well, Newt Bar technically, because he's injured every single month, is a kid too in terms of experience. So I think Lars Newt Bar, if he stays healthy, I think he's an excellent player.
Before we move on to our
maybe not
players,
as exciting as Dominguez, but
let me ask you about Carroll, because Carroll obviously had an off season last year, and so that's the challenge in determining his value for this year. What's your feelings on it?
I think he's probably a little bit overrated in general. But if you look at the second half performance last year, I think he's a very, very good player. He's excellent contact bat, terrific speed. He's got a little bit of power, hitting at the top of that lineup. He's a great player. 35. It was almost fully valued for me. I think I had him at 38. But it was early in the draft, and I wanted to make sure I got a star or two. And, Judge and Ohtani are going 50, 55. Like, I didn't want to spend that, but he just fit the bill for what I wanted at the time.
That's the other outfield balance too. I find we talked about balancing power and speed in the outfield, but balancing starting pitching in outfield seems to be the quest in most drafts at this point. Do I go for an outfielder at this point? But very quickly in the outfield, you're getting down to a bunch of 15, 15, 17, 17 type of guys. And there's that big group of those guys in the middle. So you go, well, no, I'll reach for a starting pitcher here instead.
Yeah. And it's funny, the standard 2-to-1 sort of hitting pitching split, I accidentally adhered to. I don't ever pay attention to that. It's really on a micro level for me. Every player, how's the value? Is it something I need? Is the value good? Okay, yes, bid. But Ariel Cohen, who I don't want to say I respect him more than everyone else, but will suffice it to say I really respect him and his knowledge of players and his values. He spent 45% on pitching, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
And of course, Nick Pollock, who is a wonderful human being and knows pitching as well as anyone does, spent 18% on pitching. So it was really weird. It's a great room. It's a smart room. It's a fun room. They're good people, and I'm looking forward to competing against them this year.
Well, there's that big glut of starting pitching, and everyone's going to approach that differently at this point.
Well, he also got
elite guys, but everyone at certain points, people will say that's a punt once you get into the glut. I'm just going to find people, and
that's what he did. And I think he was really fortunate that. Let me just see exactly who he got. He got DeGrom, Tanner Bibee, and Strider for 42 combined.
Yeah, wow.
And especially if you watched Strider at all yesterday, that dude looked ready. I'm sorry, he's got to build up, but he's looked great.
No, I'm loving Strider at this point. And DeGrom, he's going to be great. It's just a matter of how many innings great he's going to be. But
is he ever going to be healthier?
I'm sorry?
Is he ever going to be healthier than he is right now?
No, he's never going to be healthier than he is right now. And I think Chris Sale kind of skewed his value this year to an extent, because we never thought Chris Sale was going to have the type of season that he had. We knew Chris Sale could be good in small increments, but he's always going to fall off a bike or punch a TV or something. He's going to find a way to hurt himself, just like DeGrom always finds a way to hurt himself, although he does it on the mound most of the time.
Right. And that's kind of what I thought is, I like the DeGrom value. I just wasn't ready to take a pitcher there yet. And I don't know. I regret not bidding him up a little more.
All right, let's start with pitching. We haven't done much pitching so far in the podcast, and we're looking at players that the draft advisory program rates a little bit lower than ADP so far. And Luis Castillo we'll start with starting pitching. Luis Castillo had a down sort of year last year. There's a lot of, at least in the strikeout rate, there's some degradation there. So the draft advisory program looks at that going forward in their projections and values them a little bit lower than most everyone else seems to value them at this point.
Yeah, I think so. As far as I can tell, and I haven't map this for every single player in the database, but I believe that the gap between where Castillo is being drafted and where we believe he should be drafted is larger than that of any other player.
Wow.
He is average draft position right now is the 8th pick of the 3rd round in 12-team leagues. We have him in the middle of the 18th round. That is a gap.
Yeah.
And I think it's backed up. You talk about a little bit of a down year, degradation in strikeout rate last year, and it's backed up by the stuff. He's had 4 straight years of declining velocity, career low in swinging strike rate last year. XFIP was up in the 380 range, so kind of barely better than an average pitcher. And, you know, the control has continued to improve, and the combination of that and the park change have kind of masked his decline phase a little bit, but he's 32. He is declining. And you've seen the exit velocity and the fly ball rate go up over the last couple of years. If he were still pitching in Cincinnati,
Yeah,
you would not want him.
Yeah, and despite the park changes, home run per 9 have gone up. His home run per fly ball has gone up. So that's exactly what I was thinking. If he was still in Cincinnati, he would be looking at a completely different pitcher.
Oh, I bet he'd have a mid-4s ERA.
Yep.
And I think that, you know, what I'm seeing from Castillo, he is still a good pitcher. I would say he's still an above average pitcher. But for me, I mean, maybe he's like SP 30 now. He's being drafted kind of at the edge of SP1, SP2. I don't see that at all. Like, if he's your 3rd starter, okay. 4th, better. For me, I doubt I will have him in any format this year just because of that disparity between what I think he is and what we think he is and what everybody else thinks he is.
Well, what happens is where we are and where the draft advisory program is he's in that glut of pitching at that point.
Exactly.
If you don't identify that and you still have him a half notch above that, and then you have to spend a little bit more for him. And I think you can get a bunch of comparable pitchers for much less value than what's being paid for Castillo at this point.
Almost every pitcher on our list, with the exception of Ryan Pepio and maybe Ronald Blanco, kind of fall into that same category for me this year. All these guys we're going to talk about today, I think they're all kind of in that batch.
Well, that's the important determination going into drafts this year: is who is in that glut and who are the true separators. Who do you want to spend up for, and who can you afford to? It's not punt, but it's like you get into that glut and you can wait. I'm finding in a lot of leagues at this point, even on the waiver wire and post draft, there are guys I could interchange a bunch of these guys with guys that I got late. Right?
Yeah,
that glut is so big.
It is, and you're spot on with why we're looking at it this way, that we feel that Castillo has dropped into that sort of above average 40 pitcher group.
Yep. All right, let's go on. We're going to skip here. We're going to go back and forth hitters and pitchers, but let's go to Blanco while we're on the subject. Blanco is another guy who we have rated lower than what he's been going in ADP.
Sure. Yeah, I think Ronald Blanco, because he just sort of burst onto the scene last year and had a very successful year, a 2.80 ERA on the surface. People think, oh, he is some upcoming prospect. You know, Houston, they always develop pitchers. Well, this dude's 31, okay? Yep. He's no prospect. He just came out of nowhere, and a lot of the out of nowhere was luck-based. His control is terrible. The xFIP was 409, so basically he's a league average pitcher that put up a really good year. But the combination of that surface ERA and the fact that he pitches for Houston is really pushing him up draft boards. He's in the mid-20th round by ADP. We have him late 26th round. Another guy that I probably just won't end up with at all. Average ground ball rate, average exit velocity allowed. The velocity on its surface is down for his arm the last couple of years. Yes, he does miss bats at a good rate, and that's a nice little thing in his favor. That and the fact that Houston is a good team, so win equity is decent. But I just feel like he's vastly overrated. And if he put up a 5 ERA this year, I would not be shocked.
No, he misses bats at a good rate, but not the type of rate that has a sub-3 ERA attached to it. And
exactly.
It's a really simple look. You look at xFIP is easy 409. You go to left on base percentage 83.6%, and he was 80% last year in only 52 innings pitched. So maybe he's demonstrating an ability to leave guys on base, but it's not because he limits homers. It's not because he limits walks. Maybe he just puts too many guys on base to score, to keep, you can't keep up with scoring these guys on that point. Swinging strike rate is okay, but it's not great. There's nothing here that supports a 2.80 ERA, and this is the first warning flag that we'll do this spring, but we talk about it all the time. ERA is less predictable than wins. And ERA, we weigh too much on ERA. We put too much weight on ERA. You got to break out of that habit and you got to examine the ERA with some skepticism, because that 2.80 ERA just isn't real.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And the thing that you and I talk about this all the time is the control. And he is a control challenged pitcher. And in this day and age, and really for the last 30 years, if you allow free passes, guys are going to eventually score. So I not the kind of arm that I want, especially down around round 20. Like, why do I want a guy that's so flammable?
Yeah, and again, he's in that glut. I'm guessing there are going to be guys on the waiver wire. There are going to be guys who are going to exit the draft who are probably better bets than Blanco at this point.
I would wager so in almost any format. Yeah.
And he gives up a 42% fly ball percentage. He's in the 40s in fly ball percentage. He strikes out guys, but not a ton of them, not enough to make up for the walks that he gives up. He's just not the guy we like. And it's not the guy a computer model likes on the draft advisory program either. But again, 3 pillars of starting pitching, doesn't do anything particularly well, doesn't strike out guys particularly well, doesn't control walks particularly well, keeps the ball in the ballpark, but, not at a super rate either. And again, the 83.6% left on base percentage and the xFIP before 9 tells the whole story. Just stay away at the price he's going for. Stay away.
I agree 100%. I mean, if you want to rank these guys, the 3 main things that we look at on kind of a 1 to 10 scale, in terms of generating strikeouts, Blanco's 7.5 out of 10.
Yep.
In terms of limiting walks, he's probably a 2 out of 10.
Yep.
And in terms of limiting home runs, he's probably a 5 out of 10. So, he's only good at one of the things, and he's not elite at it. He's just good. So it's just the kind of guy I stay away from.
And Anthony Perry identified when we started digging into the 3 pillars of starting pitching, walks is the correlation of success. And that's the area he has the most problem in and got your lowest 1 to 10 rating on.
Exactly. 100%.
We don't want guys who walk guys. Just don't want them.
Unless they are absolutely elite at the other 2 things in terms of like generating ground balls to get double plays and striking guys out. Unless it's that, I don't want it.
I'm sorry you have Dylan Cease on your Tout Wars team, so.
I'm sorry as well, but the value was fine.
Sorry to put it that way, but yeah.
He is elite at those other 2 areas. So
he is elite, yes, he can make up for it to an extent, and does make up for it to an extent. It's just that there's volatility involved.
There is, and I don't love it, but again, I am a strict value player in auctions. So if the number is correct, I don't care that I don't love the guy.
But you're going to be able to sit him out on the days when he needs to be sat out, right? Pick the starts. Yeah, I know.
I'll never, unless he's in Colorado, and even then, I probably won't sit him. He'll be in when he's pitching.
Especially in that Tout Wars league, which is very inning space. You got to take your innings. You really can't sit guys.
Always, and that's why my reserve list is 4 starters, a reliever, and a third baseman.
Yes, just
everybody looks at me like, you're allowed to take hitters, right? I'm like, but why would you?
No, just pile up as many innings as possible. That's the way to go in that league.
First guy I took in the reserves was Brandon Woodruff. I just like, come on, why would you not?
Yep.
You have unlimited IL, and starts innings are the only thing that matter, really.
Yep. Let's switch to hitters. Ronald Acuna, we're drafting him a little bit lower than the ADP, and Ronald Acuna is a great player, or has been a great player in 2 of the seasons he's played in. Is that enough?
Well, Ronald Acuna is a great player.
Yeah.
Below average contact ability, but everything else, plate discipline is excellent. The power is excellent. The speed is excellent. He's on a great team. Like, everything is good about Ronald Acuna. But average draft position lately is mid 3rd round. We've got him early 5th round, and it's strictly 2 things. Number 1 is that now we're looking at probably mid-May for a return date. He's going to miss 6 weeks. That's a lot of the season. Yep. So if your 3rd round pick is missing a month and a half, if you knew that going in, that they were going to get hurt and be out for like all of July and half of August, you wouldn't draft him there. Right. So why are you drafting him there? He's going to be out. And the second thing, and this is even more important, is that it really looks like he is going to be limited in terms of how much he runs. Not physically limited. It's more of I'm not going to do this because I don't want to hurt myself.
Right. Which is smart, by the way.
What's that?
Which is smart.
Oh, without question. Yep. Ronald Acuna without steals is still a great player. And the steals are way more important to us as fantasy players than they are to the Braves.
Well, without steals, I mean, he's still going to steal 20 bases. He's just not going to steal 70.
I mean, if he's playing 120 games, will he steal 20 bases?
Yeah, fair enough.
I think that's probably around the over-under.
It comes down with offensive players because most of the columns are cumulative in most of the leagues. It comes down to how much is this guy worth? Tell me how many at bats he's going to get.
Right.
He had 643 in 2023. It's a very valuable player. He's not going to steal 70 bases again, of course.
Yep.
But the first thing you got to tell me, is he getting 200? Is he getting 400? Is he getting 600 at bats? That's the first thing you got to determine. And what are you willing to bet on?
Well, I mean, you know going in that he's missing 100 and some at bats right off the bat.
Yep.
So it's just like, why would he go in the third round? I don't get it. Like, I love the guy. He's a great player. And I guess people just get enamored with the skill set and figure they can paper it over for a couple months and hopefully he'll be healthy the rest of the year.
Well,
I
this
think that
is the year. This is going to be the year, except again, in this case, it's not even like he's starting the season and he's injury prone. He's not starting the season. You have a definitive example of what his at bats are going to be at this point, and you're still paying full price for him.
the ceiling is probably 450.
Yeah.
If the ceiling is 450, the ceiling is 75%, how can he be worth third round value?
Yeah. I mean, that's 30 home run season at best, and highly unlikely, I think.
30-20 would be, in my mind, the max that he can give you this year.
Yeah. Which would be great.
Yeah,
but,
if you get that, but that's the ceiling.
Yeah.
You're drafting Acuna, normally the ceiling's 50-50, 40-50, whatever. I mean, you're not going to get that. You're just not.
Yep. And there are guys in there that, you can draft a lot later that are going to get, if he's, let's say 50 is the ceiling, 30-20, 50 is the ceiling of stolen bases and home runs.
Hmm.
Let's say it's 45. Let's say it's 40. You can get 40. You can get damn close to 40 a lot later in the draft. You don't have to spend that capital on him.
Absolutely true.
Yep. Luis Rengifo, I'm sorry.
Luis Rengifo. I do not understand his draft position. I don't. He's going in the 8th round. Like,
well, what's going on here?
I just, it boggles the mind. He's 28. So last year was like his first real full year. And he put up 24 steals. And I assume that the 300 average and the 24 steals, people are forecasting out and saying, oh, well, he's going to be one of the 10 guys to hit 300 and he's going to steal maybe 20 or 30 bases. And this is great. So, all right, number one, Rengifo's sprint speed ranked 360th out of 566 qualifiers last year. This is not a fast man. If you've seen him, he's a little chubby. 24 steals. Yeah. I don't see it again, especially on a team like the Angels that really is going to be offensively challenged. I just don't see it. Like, I think 20 would be a wildly optimistic scenario.
Well, 24 steals and 283 at bats. He gets 450 at bats. He's going to steal 50, right?
I mean, that's what people must be extrapolating to. And I think you're absolutely crazy if you think that's going to happen.
Yeah. And that 24 steals was out of nowhere. Obviously, once you demonstrate a skill, you own it. Bill James. So
yeah,
he steals 24 bases. Yeah. He can do it, but whether he's going to, the idea that he's going to repeat that, it's nuts.
It is. And you look at that 300 average and you say, all right, well, this guy must be just an elite contact hitter.
Nope.
Below average plate discipline, average contact ability. How that gets to 300 is beyond my ability to fathom. So, and he also has below average power. So here we go. We got a guy.
He's a lifetime 253. Mm-hmm. Chase rate went over 40% last year and he hit 300. You think that's repeatable?
Yeah. No, it's absolutely not repeatable. So just look at the StatCast expected stats.
Yep.
He put up 300 with a 417 slugging, and StatCast hit him at 262 and 352 respectively. Yep. Do you want your 8th round pick to give you a slightly better than league average batting average with no power and 15 to 20 steals? Is that what you want? Because that's what you're going to get, probably.
You can get Robles at that point, can't you?
Robles is a better player than Rengifo.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And
he's going to be well available at that point. The quality of contact numbers are brutal. 32% hard hit percentage, barrel rate of 2.5 last year. And again, he had 16 homers and 394 at bats in 2023 and 17 homers and 489. So there's a little pop there, but the pop went away for the speed. And I don't think the speed is believable. I don't know why the pop went away. I mean, his pull percentage went down a little bit. Maybe he was asked to do something different. The fly ball rate went down quite a bit. So maybe he was just asked to play a different role in there, but I'm just not buying into it.
I'm not either. He's one of those guys, like, you get in those draft rooms and quick drafts and guys just start coming up and they're at the top of your list. And I just ignore him completely every time he comes up. I would never, last pick of the draft, maybe, but he's just a guy I just ignore 100%. I think it was a complete mirage last year. And I cannot believe where he's being drafted. We have him forecast in the 15th round, which is 7 rounds lower than he's going. And I still don't know that I'd touch him there.
Yeah, and again, as you pointed out, the main thing, the 24 stolen bases, not a matter of raw speed. I don't know. I can't account for it, and I just don't think it's going to happen again. I'm not willing to pay for it.
I am with you all the way there. And a guy that I'm ending up with all the time that I will be willing to put my reputation on that says he has a better year than Rengifo is Joey Ortiz, and he's like undrafted in most formats.
I know, right?
And I would be happy to pit the two of them against each other at the end of the year.
I'm sitting here and like in my house league, I'm sitting here looking for an outfielder to fill out the last spot. I'm not talking about this guy.
All my drafts are done. I don't care. But I would have said it anyway because I'm just not that. Well, I like sharing knowledge I think I have, and if somebody snipes me on them, then so be it.
All right, Mark Vientos, 27 homers last year, pretty much out of nowhere. What do we do with him this year?
Yeah, Vientos got a lot of buzz early in the spring. He's been fading back a little bit lately. But the nice power surge that he had last year really pushed him up people's draft boards. That and the combination of that and third base being generally kind of a weaker position. He's going late in the 7th, actually early in the 7th round. We have him going early in the 9th round via value, and the power is good. It's not elite, but it's very good. Probably a 6.5 on the scouting scale, 65 out of 80. It's good power for sure, and his plate discipline is decent. He doesn't chase really more than the average. But the contact ability is terrible, and he has no speed. So if a power only guy, sure. 7th round, no. You don't want one-trick ponies there unless that trick is really good.
Right.
And Vientos, you look, again, StatCast expected data. He put up 266 with a 516 slugging last year, which is an above-average batting average, an excellent isolated power. Fantastic. 250s, great. StatCast had him at 246, 463. So roughly a league average batting average. And what is that? A 217 ISO. Yep. So yeah, I mean, I think the power is great and it'll probably be there. He could easily hit 30 this year, but I don't think the average will be a help, and he gives you no speed. So I just don't see him going that early. And you look at the second half numbers, 247, 302, 489, once pitchers figured him out a little bit. I think that's kind of more along the lines of what you should expect this year.
That's going to be a big thing. I mean, the quality of contact is actually really good. 91% exit velocity there, 91 miles an hour exit velocity, 91.2. Excellent launch angle, excellent barrel rate. When he makes contact, he does well. I think that's a big thing, though. And I think when you start looking at these players at different angles, you look at the late season, his late season stats, pitchers have figured him out a little bit. He can certainly adjust back. But I think I think as he becomes more of a factor, there's going to be more focus on him, more scheming on him, and we'll see how he reacts to it.
Yeah, I mean, he is only 25, so there is the opportunity for a bit of growth there. I am less negative on Vientos than I am on a lot of the guys on this list that we're talking about, but I still think that he's being a little bit overvalued, and particularly, the big media markets, the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Yankees, the Mets. I think their players do get pushed up a little bit just because of general exposure and familiarity of people with the player and having seen him.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit worried about his at bats because again, he had 27 homers and 480 at bats, I think it was at this point. So that's pretty good. Whether he can get the 480 at bats or not, I'm looking at his splits a little bit, and he's got same side issues. He only hit 251. He hits better against left-handers, but and it doesn't look like his playing time is going to be challenged to that extent. He should be able to get 450 at bats back again, which gets him in the mid 20s in home runs, I think, pretty predictably, and not much else of a contribution, by the way. But if you need a couple homers at the end of your draft, here's a chance to get some.
Yeah, I think so. The one potential threat to his playing time is that Jeff McNeil is going to miss the early part of the season, and I think that failed prospect, post-hype prospect Brett Baily is probably going to take some of his time. So here is the possible situation. I wouldn't discount it completely. Baily is a good hitter. I've watched him a lot at Syracuse. He's a good player. If he comes out house of fire, he's on the left side.
Yep.
If they start, McNeil comes back and they want to adjust things and Vientos starts in a slump, I could easily see Baily taking some of the tougher right-handed pitching assignments at third base once the Mets are fully healthy. And then you're back down to Vientos getting last year's amount of playing time with pitchers having figured him out a little bit. So I can see a situation there where the floor is not great here. And the ceiling's nice. There's the other flip side of that where he makes a little bit of gains in contact and maintains the power, and he hits 260 to 270 with 35 homers, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, he's worth what you drafted him at. I just feel like the likely scenario is that he's going a couple rounds too early.
I guess the cautionary tale is just be a little stingy on him. Make sure you get him a good price.
Yep. Agreed.
Don't buy into everything. Jake Berger, on the other hand, nice year in Miami, by the way, with 29 homers. I wouldn't have expected that.
It's like, is that like being the most successful guy in purgatory?
The most successful guy in purgatory. Exactly right. So there's some value here with him and his power, but still he's being overdrafted according to the draft advisory program.
Yeah, the draft advisory program actually has him like 3.5 rounds overdrafted. It's a average draft position, end of the 9th round. We've got him middle of the 13th round. I can see, here's another one. I can envision a good scenario where this pick plays out. Better offense, much better park environment than in Miami. He's still, I think he turns 29 in the first or second week of the season. So still in his prime. He's fine. The game power is very good. The raw power is elite. You look at his max exit velocities, and they're up there with just about anybody's. He has a ton of power, poor contact, poor speed, below average plate discipline. Like nothing else is good about Jake Berger, but he has power, and the likely increase in counting stats if his playing time stays significant. There's reason for some optimism here in addition to reason for pessimism, much like Vientos. I just think he's probably going a little bit too early. Interesting little trivia tidbit about Jake Berger. He's hit exactly 250 for 3 years in a row. That's hard to do.
Right. Looking at it. Yeah. Over 1,000 at bats too. Here's the thing though. Home runs are kind of at a premium in this day and age. And if the guy, he's had 30 home runs on average over the last 2 years, he's capable of power. And sometimes he's a fit. That guy is a fit. That power is a fit. The home run totals are a fit. You got to give up a little bit in batting average, and you got to give up a lot in speed. But even at third base, getting those kind of homers at third base, I kind of like that value there.
I do too. And you're getting a park bump and an offense bump. So the runs and RBIs are probably going to go up. Home runs should go up by a couple. And, the average 250 average is above average anymore. Last year, league-wide, 243. So he's giving you roughly league average batting average and excellent power. I can see cases to take Berger. He fits on certain rosters. I just think that people are expecting a bit much from him.
I think sometimes, and this might be a market type of situation where the draft value is up, because at a certain point you get into the draft and you start looking at guys who are going to hit you 25 homers and above, and they aren't there. They just aren't there at that point. So if you're looking at Jake Berger a round or two before what the draft advisory program says he could go, it might be a matter of, well, I've gone too far in speed in the outfield, or I haven't got enough power yet. Maybe I'll pay up a little bit for Berger because he's the last guy on the board who has that kind of power.
Yeah, I could definitely see a situation where that makes sense. So, you just take everything that we're saying, all the information we're giving you, and you incorporate it into what's going on in your draft or your auction.
All right, I should have asked before we started. Yainer Diaz or Yandy Diaz?
Yainer Diaz.
Yeah.
And I mean, I stayed away from most of the catchers on this, but I did include the two that I think are being overdrafted for different reasons, more than the others. Yainer is going in the 4th round.
Yeah, because the draft advisory program has a bias against certain positions. We talked about it earlier in the program: catcher, relief pitcher, DH, something like that. And basically, the draft advisory program basically advises you to punt catchers at this point.
Yes, catchers and closers.
Yeah,
it advises punting those positions. And Yainer Diaz, I do think that there is reason to devalue him. I think that you had no speed, poor launch angle, average contact ability. I know he hit 299 last year. He has average contact ability with horrific plate discipline. He swings at everything. So the fact that he was able to hit 300 with no speed, terrible plate discipline, and really only average raw contact ability is frankly quite amazing.
Yep.
I don't expect that to continue. The power is above average. And the offense is
wait a second, though, because we put a lot of stock in expected batting average. You know what his expected batting average is? 299. Yeah.
Yeah, I put stock in it when I feel like it, and I ignore it when I feel like it. So
that's why I was stopping us. Yeah.
Call me opinionated, but which I certainly am. Sometimes I see the expected data and I'm like, well, how does this make sense? Yeah. Like, sure, he's got good exit velocity, but he swings and misses a ton, and he's slow as hell, and he hits the ball on the ground, a decent amount of the time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Any ground ball to the left side, he ain't beating it out.
A
He couldn't
catcher
beat it
hitting the
short.
ball, a catcher hitting the ball on the ground more than half the time, you're not expecting a 299 batting average.
That's poor. You don't want to see that.
Yeah.
So I just feel like Diaz, because of the way he hits,
By
sure,
the
he'll
way, he
probably put
pulls
like
the
a
ball
270.
too. Two things that hurt your expected batting average are certainly a BABIP, and he posted a 338 BABIP. Pulling the ball and hitting the ball on the ground, and you have no speed. How does this work?
It just makes no sense. So I feel like the BABIP will come back toward league average last year, and if it does that, he's going to drop 20 to 30 points of batting average right from that. So for me, Diaz 270, 25. Sure, I'd sign up for that, but that is probably not worth fourth round.
Oh, fourth round. No, I can't do fourth round. I can't do fourth round on a catcher.
No, I mean, we talked about this guy last week, but I'm going to bring him up again. If you want to put up raw, like you don't look at raw stats, you just look at the underlying stats, like plate discipline, chase rate, swinging strike percentage, exit velocity, launch angle. If you look at those things and compare Yainer Diaz and Patrick Baily, who are expected to have roughly the same amount of playing time, by the way.
Yep.
If you compare those two guys, you would be hard pressed to find the difference between them. Yet one is going in the fourth round and one is going in the 9,000th round or whatever. So Patrick Baily, for me, I am perfectly happy waiting on a second catcher until the very end because no one drafts him, and I think that he could surprise.
This is the perfect description of why the draft advisory program punts catchers so much, because rather than taking Diaz in the fourth round, take Patrick Baily in reserves or get him in the first round of waivers, and you're pretty much there.
I feel I spent $2 on Tyler Stevenson and Patrick Baily, $1 a piece.
Yep.
And I will put my catching performance up against the other 11 teams at the end of the year, and I think I'll be average.
Yeah, and what did you get in the fourth round? Well, you didn't. It was an auction, so you didn't have a fourth round. But the rest
my fourth round equivalent was probably Dylan Cease.
There you go.
Either that, or I had Corbin Carroll, Ellie De La Cruz, Jarren Duran, and Bryce Harper. So one of those four.
Well, Dylan Cease and Patrick Baily or Yainer Diaz? Which do you want?
Cease and Baily.
Definitely. Yeah, of course you do. Yeah, of course.
I mean, Yainer Diaz is a very good player, but the difference between his raw ability and Patrick Baily's raw ability is pretty small for the 20-some rounds of draft capital.
And by the way, you're playing in a one-catcher league in daily transactions. Take a second catcher. Add 150 at bats to your catching position, and you're going to do really well. You can get two cheap catchers and make a pretty good catcher out of them at that point.
100% accurate.
Yep. All right, Salvador Perez. While we're talking catchers, and Sal's a guy I really always like because he's not a separator among catchers, but especially not. Well, he is kind of a separator among catchers, isn't he? So how much do you pay up for a guy who's a little bit better than the rest of the catching position?
It's not even a question of talent with Perez that I think continues to hold his position this long up at the top of the catching draft board. It's the fact that he perpetually plays more than every other catcher pretty much.
At bats. Yeah, no, exactly.
And that's always the thing with catchers. Like your average catcher is going to play 120 games. Sal Perez tends to play 130 to 140. Those 15 games are worth quite a bit at 60 to 75 plate appearances. That's a big deal.
That's getting a second catcher in a one-catcher league without spending a roster spot on a second catcher.
You got it. Now, the problem is that, well, it's multifold, really. We've got Perez as a mid-12th round pick. He's going mid-5th round. So the odds of me ever getting him are really, really slim. And last year, Perez has very good power and an optimal launch angle to exploit that power.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. Everything else is horrendous. He's 34 years old. KC has some exciting players, but the offense as a whole is average. So you're not getting as much of a bump there as you might think. Second highest BABIP of his career last year. Second most games of his career last year.
Yep.
This is just all like he is being priced at his maximum value. And what are the odds that a 34-year-old catcher has another significantly healthy year and plays 150 games? Negligible? Zero? I mean, it's one of these things. So he's the kind of guy that if you're looking at what his value should be, you're never going to get him.
Here's the thing, and I'm not making the argument to take him at the price he's going for, because I don't believe you should. But playing the game of what are the odds he's going to get 590 at bats again next year? Here's the thing with the catching position, though. If he doesn't, you got nothing to lose. If you don't pay a lot for him, just get another catcher and put him in there.
That's the if, though. I mean, if you're spending a 5th round pick on him and you could have gotten James Wood or, just to name a guy, I just think that it's a massive, massive overpay. And at best case, he gives you that value. He's not going to give you first round value because he's just so undisciplined a hitter and he's so slow and he's old. He's not going to give you first, second, third round value. The best thing he could do is give you fifth round value, and that's where you're taking him. That's how you lose leagues.
Okay,
when you pick guys with no upside and a pretty poor floor.
Get ready for your shrug here. 271 batting average, 275 expected batting average, 46% chase rate, 44% ground ball rate, 49% pull rate. That doesn't add up either.
And the speed of a glacier.
And the speed of a glacier. Exactly right.
Yeah.
All right. So what's the problem with Kyle Schwarber? Why does the draft advisory program? What doesn't it like about Kyle Schwarber?
It doesn't like that. It doesn't like his defense, probably. I don't know. I really don't. This is the one on this whole list that I really kind of disagree with. I think Kyle Schwarber, particularly if we're looking at this in an OBP format, he's fine where he's being drafted. Mid-6th round via ADP right now. We've got him ranked end of 11th round, and I don't see it. He has elite power. He is just a half a step under the Judge, Ohtani, Stanton, O'Neal Cruz type of exit velocities.
And he's consistent. You can depend on that power.
Because of that pull and launch angle, yeah, he gets to every bit of that raw. And he's got fantastic plate discipline. He really is an average contact hitter, too. So Kyle Schwarber, if he put up a 280 average and 40 homers one year, it would not stun me. But the way that he hits is sort of all about power maximization and the hell with batting average. So it's unlikely that he'll do that. He really just tries to elevate and pull the ball most of the time. And that's why you get these pretty poor batting averages. In an OBP format with his plate discipline, which is as good as just about anybody's in the league, he is an extremely valuable player. Sure, there's no speed, but hey, 4 category guys are all right. So I like Schwarber. I sort of disagree with where the program has him. I'd put him more up in the 7th or 8th round. So a slight overpay would get you to his ADP.
Trying to look at his qualifications here. He has 5 games in the outfield, so he's going to qualify in the outfield for most places.
Some leagues, yes.
For some leagues, in a lot of places. So I was just wondering if it was position bias because we know the draft advisory program doesn't like DHs.
Yep. And I think that I have it set for 10-game eligibility. So that's probably why it did what it did with it.
Yeah, well, there you go. So they have him as a DH only, which is, why I keep offending the draft advisory program with Sal Perez every year.
Yep, exactly. Who is another guy, he could have made this list because the software has him as a pretty massive overpay at ADP. But again, just like Schwarber, very similar hitters, really. Just one's lefty, one's righty. I have no problem with either one of them.
And these guys, Schwarber and Acuna, held their value even back at the time when home runs were prominent. You could get enough homers throughout the draft. 20 homers was easy to find. It's not that easy to find anymore. You get a guy who's consistently, who's a really good bet to deliver 30-plus homers for you. You got to pay up for him a little bit.
Yeah, I think so, especially with the relative scarcity of power versus the relative lack of scarcity of speed.
Yep. Isaac Paredes here, 19 home runs last year, 80 RBI in a 238 season. A little down year from 2023, but the draft advisory program is playing off that down year and nobody's buying into last year is what's going on there.
Isaac Paredes is a guy that we actually had a long conversation with the CBS guys. We very much disagree on Isaac Paredes. And I understand where they're coming from, and I knew what they would say minute one, which is that if there is a park that is perfect for Paredes, it is Houston. And Chicago was absolutely not that. Isaac Paredes is a guy that looks like the complete opposite of a hitter than who he is. His raw stats look like a low average, high power guy. So you're thinking big exit velocities, a lot of contact issues. Well, no, he's pretty much the exact opposite of that. He has a well below average exit velocity, relying strictly on massive fly ball and pull rates to hit the ball out. If you look at a map of his home runs, it's basically just a dot down the left field line, barely over the fence.
Yeah,
that's where he hits every one of his 25 to 30 homers, which with the Crawford boxes in Houston, I get it. I get the appeal. But the batting average is almost guaranteed to be garbage, despite his good plate discipline and very good contact rates, because he simply just tries to elevate and pull everything. He also has no speed. So, I can see this working out. I can see it being a complete massive bust. The draft advisory program has him in the mid 26th round. He's being drafted late 14th round. I don't really have a problem with him where he's being drafted. I'm just unlikely to ever end up with him because I look at a guy like Joey Ortiz and I just like the skill set better than I like what Paredes offers.
At a certain point, you look at 2023 and the 31 homers, and you have to look at it as the aberration, and you have to look at last year as regression to what he is. And I don't think the ballpark is enough of a solution here because you look at the quality of contact numbers. His quality of contact numbers have never supported 30 homers. They're more in the 20 homer range. And he may be able to pull and get some Crawford box homers and add to that total, maybe creep into 22, 23, maybe at this point. But that's about it. I don't think the ballpark's a panacea for him.
Well, I mean, I feel like there's this little tiny subset of players where they have such limited exit velocity, but they hit the ball in the air and pull so much that a 10 feet of fence matters an awful lot. Or in the case of the Crawford boxes, 30 feet of fence compared to Wrigley. I think it will matter more for him than it will matter for most any other player. You know who he reminds me of quite a bit? And it's another player that I just never drafted, and I was perpetually calling for decline, and it took so long for it to happen that I was just wrong, is Brian Dozier.
Oh, yeah.
Massively below average exit velocities, huge fly ball and pull percentages. Every home run seemingly cleared was a wall scraper that, made it 2 feet over the left field fence down the line. But he was able to continue to do that for a very long time. And Paredes is only 26. I could see that happening in Houston because it's just so accessible for his style of hitting.
To what extent, though? I mean, mid-20s?
Yeah, I think 25 is probably the ceiling for what I see from him, just because the exit velocity is so limited that he's just on the road. He's probably just not going to hit a lot of homers. And how many can he realistically hit in 81 games at home?
Here's another possibility. He hit 31 homers in 2023. That puts him a little bit higher in the stack pile and batter preparation and scheming preparation as you go forward. He's a strong pull hitter. He's a strong fly ball hitter. Those are the easiest guys to scheme.
Sliders away.
Yeah,
the one thing that helps him is he actually does have very good plate discipline. So he does not chase much. And sooner or later, most pitchers make mistakes, and he is a good mistake hitter. So, I get it. I get what the CBS guys, they love about Paredes. They think he's a great late round target, and I can see it happening. It just won't be on my team, I don't think.
All right. Let's switch over to some pitching a little bit. And Baily Oberr is a guy I always look for. I never get him. I always look for.
Yeah, because everybody pushes him up so far.
I know, right? Yeah. And he does always tends to go, oh, I like him, but I don't know if I'd go that early. Especially, again, given the glut of pitching, because do you consider him in the glut? Is he the top half of the glut? Is he top third of the glut? Is he even that high?
I think he's better than most of the other guys on this list that we have.
Yeah.
I like him, but I feel like the ceiling is limited by the stuff. The stuff is just it's sort of average. He makes up for it. He's the kind of guy we love. Excellent control.
Yep.
It's as good as just about anybody's. And the exit velocity allowed has improved 2 years in a row, where he's not the kind of guy that just gets pummeled in the zone anymore. The stuff has become good enough where it's okay. Swing strike rate is up 3 years in a row. Tons of fly balls, which becomes problematic in particular instances. And that's why,
that's the killer here, the fly ball rate.
It is, because his stuff isn't good enough to beat people in the zone repeatedly. He's got a great changeup, and that helps him tremendously because the fastball is sort of pedestrian. What I wrote, and I usually will write like a 3 or 4 word synopsis of a player at the end of my written notes.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wrote about Oberr is perfectly above average. He's not exciting, but I think there's a good floor here. I don't think there's a great ceiling, but the ceiling is okay. We've got him mid 13th round. He's going before the 10th round. And I feel like people are putting him up at the front of that glut of pitchers. And there's just some guys that I probably prefer. Like if he comes at the right price, I'm fine with Baily Oberr. Usually, like we talked about, though, like you mentioned, people push him up, and it just ends up being like, I think it's a bad value.
xFIP of 401, 418, 420 the 3 previous seasons to this one, 383 last year. And it was largely because I don't know if that's why it was because, but what I liked about last year was a little bit more stuff, a little bit more swing and miss, a little bit more chase in his game. If we believe in that, and he's been consistently producing, and his ERA actually went up to 3.93 at that point. He'd been outperforming his xFIP to that point. I like the fact that there's a little bit more stuff there and a little bit more swing and miss. And I believe that I believe in it a little bit. So I kind of like his ability to be consistent anyway. I think he's got a nice floor. I don't know if he has any ceiling whatsoever above what he's been doing, but I think he has a nice floor.
That's the right assessment, I think. And if I recall correctly, he improved the delta between his fastball and change, and that really kind of augmented the ability to change, added the couple extra, tenths of a percent of swing strike rate that we'd like to see. So I like Baily Oberr. I think he is average to above average in terms of ability to miss bats now. He's well below average in terms of keeping the ball on the ground, which I may bench. Like if he goes to Yankee Stadium, I might consider benching him. He's not an every start guy for me, but he's probably a 90% start guy. And obviously the control is borderline elite. So I think he's a good pitcher. Fine mid-rotation guy. I just think he's a little too expensive.
The big difference last year, and this is where if we dig into it, we keep digging into it, it's like peeling layers of the onion, as we always say. You brought up the delta, which did increase a little bit. He's not a big velo guy, 91.7 on his four-seamer. What he did last year was he added a cutter at 19.5%. But here's the thing about that, and I like that, and it had good results. But here's the thing about that: that's in the scouting book now.
Oh
right?
yeah. And it probably wasn't until the last month or two of last season. So.
Probably wasn't until the last month or two last season. So whether that can sustain into this year, and he has the same success adding that cutter, all of it pitchers, and we're seeing it more and more. Velo is a thing. Obviously, we still love velo, but it's just keeping thoughts in the hitter's head. And if you can add an extra pitch into the hitter's head at this point, or throw them a pitch they're not thinking about in a key situation, that's such a valuable tool. They're going to be thinking about it now. So we'll see how that plays out.
You're seeing more and more guys get away from strict velocity and 3-pitch mixes and go into 5 and 6 pitch mixes. And I think that is really going to help combat the issue that we all know exists the third time through the batting order, where guys know what you have. They know what is coming, and they're just ready for you. And the ERA jumps 2 or 3 runs per 9. I think when you can have 3, 4, 5 different ways to attack a hitter, it will help you going through the order and maybe elongating your night a little bit.
Remember when and I use we loosely because I'm not sure you did, gave the Yankees all this grief about cutting fastball rates down?
Yeah, I didn't like. I thought they were trying to square peg round hole some guys. So
yeah, but that's the way the game eventually went, and fastball rates are down because again, hitters can hit velo, and velo is good, and you can beat hitters. And I'm not knocking velo at all, but there's such a great advantage to putting another thought in a hitter's head and just keeping them off balance.
Oh, no doubt about it. And we've gone away from the holy grail being velo. You're definitely getting away from that the last couple of years, because if you look at the list of what pitchers are injured, there is a correlation between velocity and likely propensity for injury.
And that's got a dollar sign attached to it.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, so development's going to look into that. I think there's been a resurgence of the curveball too, and I think because the curveball helps you tunnel an upstairs fastball, and I think another thought in the hitter's heads can be different pitch. It also can be elsewhere in the zone. Instead of down, move their eye level up a little bit and being able to tunnel a curveball and a fastball up in the zone. So it's just something else they have to think about. Such a huge advantage because there's so much going on with a pitch. If you can keep the hitter just a tiny bit off balance, is that when the release point is up and the ball is tunneling up, is that a fastball? Is that a curve? Is that coming back in the zone? What's going on there?
And the cutter too,
Yep.
cutter against opposite side hitters, really useful working in on the hands. Just things to try to combat the fact that everyone can hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yeah, fastball 221 for Baily, just to use him as an example. 58% fastball, 49% fastball, 45% fastball. Last year, 38.1. I think the whole game is trending that way.
I agree with you for the vast majority of pitchers. There are still the select few where
if you have alternate pitchers, if you have another skill set, you move away from the fastball a little bit, because in the end, it helps your fastball.
Oh, for sure. It makes it play up. And Oberr needs that because his velocity is decidedly below average in this day and age at 91 and change.
Yeah. But if you don't have it, you're still throwing fastballs.
Yep. Exactly.
Still beating people with fastballs.
Yep.
Yeah. Paul Skeens even added a pitch this year, didn't he? A spring. We're looking at a little evidence of a added pitch.
Does he need one?
No, not right now.
He's going to be pretty darn good until he gets hurt.
Don't spend it too early.
Yeah, right.
Bibee is another guy that I really like. He's a guy I look for every year in this big fat part of the pitching equation here at this point. Nice year last year at 347, had a really good season in 2023, but people are buying into it too much according to the draft advisory program.
Just a smidge. I think he's the best guy on this list. He's my favorite pitcher out of the 8 that we've got here. We've got him early 13th round. He's going end of 10th round. So it's a slight overpay we're looking at. He's got very good control, average plus exit velocity allowed, I would say. Average plus swing strike rate. He's not a huge strikeout guy, but it's good. Low ground ball rate, high line drive, high fly ball rate. Those are kind of the red flags that with these barely better than average exit velocity allowed. So he can get hit. But between the good control and the decent swing strike rate, I think you've got yourself an above average pitcher. I like Bibee, or Bibee, I think it is. I don't know. 26 years old, so maybe still a little more growth to squeeze out here. Best xFIP on this list, I believe, at 372.
Yep.
I'm kind of fine with him about where he's being picked. Early 11th round, something like that. I'm okay with him there. I think he's above. He's sort of towards the top of the class of that big group of 40 pretty good pitchers.
Yeah, well, this is the game this year, right? I mean, with starting pitching, this is the game over the last couple of years, is identifying who's in the top half of those 40 pitchers, who's not, who's in the top third, who do you spend on, who do you not spend on.
Well, and this is the thing, is there are a couple guys that jump out to me, and the first one that comes to mind that is going later than these guys, but I prefer to everyone on this list is Christopher Sanchez.
Yeah.
Fabulous control, monstrous ground ball rate, and average plus swing strike rate, ability to miss bats. So he misses bats like Bibee and Oberr and these guys with much better control, much better stuff, and the ability to keep the ball down, which neither of those guys have.
Yeah, the 3 pillars of starting pitching, which we talk about a lot for us when we first started discussing it, was walking guys, keeping the ball in the ballpark, and striking out guys when you need to. And Anthony took it over and he switched it from home run to fly ball rate to ground ball rate, which is really important. And in fact, at this point, I would rank strikeouts third. I don't want a guy who can't strike out guys. Don't get me wrong. All I need is him to be able to punch out guys when he gets in trouble. I'm really looking for walk rate first, and I'm working for ground ball rate second.
Yeah, I probably put K's second and ground ball rate third, but they're so close that, I mean, we're basically saying the same thing. And a guy like Christopher Sanchez, I mean, if we go back to that 1 to 10 rating scale at those 3 things, he's 10 out of 10 at keeping the ball on the ground, 9 out of 10 in terms of walk rate, and probably 6 out of 10 in terms of strikeouts. Why is that guy going to like the 15th round? I just don't, it makes no sense to me. I think he's a massive underdraft right now.
It goes back to Nick Rosselletti and his Kevin Brown quotient when we're talking ground ball rate and strikeout rate, right?
Bringing it back from the past.
I know, but we were there, right? And this is what we've been talking about for a long time. And over the course of writing for Fantistics and InsiderBaseball.com and doing what we do, we've kind of honed it a little bit. And the game has changed and kind of morphed into it too. As they've moved away from the 3 true throughout, they've tried to move away from the 3 true outcomes. It's still there. So don't walk guys and keep the ball in the ballpark.
Well, they're the most important things. You could give up a whole mess of singles, and there's very little anybody can do to control that. Seeing eye singles and whatever, but fine. I mean, you don't plan for things that you can't really have influence over. They just happen.
Right.
But walks, you have influence over. Missing bats, you have influence over. And not allowing hitters to elevate the ball, you have influence over. So those 3 things, we can grade them. We can rank people based on them. So we do.
And ground balls is what you can control. And basically the outcomes are a little bit better on ground balls than they are on fly balls.
Well, and the damage is significantly less. Singles and doubles versus other stuff.
Okay, so Freddie Peralta, and I've had him for the last 2 seasons on several different teams and just been vastly disappointed. And as I look at the numbers now, I don't know why I was so disappointed, but they weren't great seasons. What's everybody seeing so far this year?
Well, last year was a real decline.
Disappointed versus the price, right, is why I was disappointed.
I think so. And a lot of that is because he does miss bats very well. So people think, all right, well, if he just has a year where he's not going to allow a bunch of homers, he's going to be great.
Yeah.
But then he allows homers because that's what he does.
Yep.
So, Peralta, the control is subpar. He does have good exit velocity against, but he allows so many fly balls that it's still going to be an issue. Good swing strike rate, but not much of a chase rate. So I think that all equates to he just does not have good control. So he misses in the zone. He misses outside the zone. He's just one of those guys that he's getting by on stuff. When the stuff deteriorates, which it will, there is going to be a huge problem here, and he'll be somebody that kills your team. For now, 393 xFIP, and there have been reports that he feels like he was tipping some pitches last year, And I wouldn't be surprised to see him kind of bounce back a little bit because he does miss bats quite well. He's just, again, he's another guy that, he's going early 12th round. We've got him mid to late 15th round.
Yeah.
I just probably won't get him much because there are other guys that I prefer in that area.
I think he's an example of how small the margins are in this business. And if you look over the last couple of years, we've seen a little bit of a deterioration in quality of contact, gone up a little bit. Not extravagant, but the margins are so slim at this point, especially when you walk guys. And it's back to walking guys. He walks guys, and he doesn't have elite strikeout anymore. He has good strikeout right now, but the quality of contact is up a little bit. His fly ball rate is up a little bit. His swinging strike rate is down from his prime. It doesn't look like a lot, but that just shows you how small the margins of error are. And I think this is more about hitters scheming him better or knowing more about him and him not being able to show them anything different at this point. I think it's familiarity. This looks to me like the splits between in division and out of division. I think they just know who Peralta is and prepare for him.
That's a really good point. That could very well be. And again, you talk about just these fine margins. But when the fine margins are happening in all three facets that we're primarily concerned with, that is a problem. And that is what pushes guys down our rankings. And I think in many instances, the general community, what you've done is what you're going to do. That's how players get valued typically. So the fact that Peralta has been a borderline ace for many years keeps him at maybe a little bit higher draft position than is perhaps warranted with his current skill set.
All right, we're going to talk about a Yankee now. I'm going to talk a guy who's been a poster child for contract years, Carlos Rodon. He's not the contract year, and he's not in the best shape of his life anymore.
No, that is visible. But, the thing with Rodon, maybe if he's allowed to grow a beard back now, maybe he's gonna get back on the good part here. I don't know. Rodon has average control, low ground ball rate.
Beards or just mustaches?
It has to, no, it's not just mustaches anymore. They changed it.
Okay.
It has to be properly groomed, I believe was the phrase that the fools used.
Is this the Alex Verdugo rule?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, maybe Rodon can go back to being his generally scruffy, handsome self. Control, average. Ground ball ability, poor. Exit velocity allowed, up 3 straight years. Tons of fly balls. 409 xFIP. Is any of this inspiring confidence? Because it does not to me.
No.
The strikeout rate is still very, very good. 14% swing strike rate is just a step below the elite guys. So Rodon still misses plenty at bats. But that park, it's not bad for a lefty generally because the lefties are the problem, and he already with that wipeout slider can handle lefties fairly well. But there's just so many fly balls, so few ground balls. I mean, he does miss in the zone and get hit pretty well. I mean, exit velocity, I believe, is up above 90 for the last couple of years. That's not good. It's not a good mix. And in the AL East, everybody can hit. Well, maybe not the Rays, but everybody can hit. So I just feel like Rodon's a thoroughly average guy that because he's a Yankee and a lefty and has had some fantastic years in the past is afforded some sort of premium for those reasons.
Yep. But you hit on it perfectly. It's exactly what I was going to say. It's the fly ball rate that's the problem here, especially in the American League East. The fly ball rate, that just leaves you too vulnerable. And he's not particularly good at limiting walks. He's not particularly good at limiting homers. He's not particularly good at striking out guys anymore. So that fly ball rate can be problematic, and it's a matter of sequence for him. But look at his xFIP, 409 even last year and 530 the year before. He's vulnerable. He's a volatile type of pitcher. He's not a guy that you want out there on a day-to-day basis. He's almost a spot starter at this point. You got to pick your starts for him, don't you?
Yep, I think so for sure. And again, I find myself this year falling more and more back onto taking those 3 things that we think are important for pitchers and ranking them 1 to 10 in terms of trying to value guys. And for me, Rodon is a 2 in terms of ground balls. He's a 5 in control, and he's an 8 in strikeouts. Yeah. That adds up to an average pitcher to me.
Yeah, not great. And again, not an every week pitcher. You're not automatically putting him in the lineup.
He goes into Fenway. I'm not excited.
Yeah, well, there's no right-handed hitters in Fenway except Alex Bregman is there now. But yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to be right-handed hitters to pepper that wall.
Ryan Pepiot is the guy who's overdrafted according to the draft advisory program.
They got him in the mid 16th round via ADP, and we've got him in the late 30th round. So that is a pretty significant overdraft. And I think the problem here, again, we get back to, perhaps Anthony's biases to a point, or, the software program's biases, if we want to give AI credit, below average control. Pepe has pretty poor control. And you combine that with a very low ground ball rate, average exit velocity allowed, and that is the proverbial prescription for disaster that we talk about all the time. You give walk, homer. That's a problem. So you want the control first. If you're going to have a low ground ball rate and an average exit velocity allowed, which means you're going to allow home runs, you don't want to be putting guys out in front of the home runs. You want a guy like Baily Oberr that's just not going to give free passes.
Right.
Pepe's going to walk over 3 per 9. Some of those guys are going to score. So, yeah, the swing strike rate is nice. 12.9% is somewhere around 70 to 75th percentile, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a good solid 7 out of 10 in terms of being able to miss bats. XFIP of 405, I think, tells the story. He's a sort of a league average guy when you combine all the facets of pitching.
But again, if you go into this and you stop prepping and you base it on his ERA to this point, 26 starts, a 3.60 ERA, you're going to overvalue him a little bit. You have to dig into this a little bit deeper than that ERA, because the expected ERA was 4.05, so that's 40 points right there, and he had a 74% left on base percentage, so maybe there's a couple points of regression there at this point. And he does the thing we don't like pitchers to do, just walks a ton of guys.
Yeah, it's really, unless you're Blake Snell or maybe Robbie Ray, there are very few guys up above 3.5 walks per 9 where I'm even remotely interested.
Dylan Cease.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, the interest is relative to the value.
So at a certain point in this big group of starting pitchers, you get down at this point, and maybe you could just, if you were on a desert island and you were looking at these starting pitchers, the one stat you would look for is walks at this point, right? In that big group of starting pitchers.
It's the first thing that I'm looking for, yes. It certainly can be superseded by excellent K ability and a great ground ball rate, but you'd need both of those things if you're walking 3.5 to me, which that's why a guy like Cease is okay with me at a certain value.
Because there's mitigating circumstances there, because he can strike out guys.
But even so, I still think Cease is an overdraft.
Well, Cease is going to be an overdraft. He's going to be an overdraft for like 4 starts a year. Is basically what's going to happen.
Yeah, probably. But if he's in your lineup for that.
Yep.
And they're not predictable, really.
Yeah. Because
just someday he doesn't have his control and there's 6 walks and 4 innings and they all score.
Hooray. So what I think you've correctly identified is not necessarily a bias by the draft advisory program, but this is how Anthony values pitchers, and this is how we value pitchers to an extent. If I've got to get you for the back half of my rotation, if you're my 4, you're my 5, you're my 6, don't walk people. Just don't walk people.
Don't make it easier for everybody else.
Don't make it easier for everybody else, right? Because again, and we've talked about this with the stolen base game, the way it's changed. You walk guys, you're putting a runner in scoring position about 40% of the time.
Yeah, you are, and 33% of guys that walk score.
Yep. So, plus, by the way, you put that runner in scoring position, it changes your defense totally. It minimizes your defense a little bit. It minimizes what you can do on the mound. It just changes the game so significantly. It's not a walk to first base anymore. It's putting a guy on second.
Yeah, and there's still plenty of power out there. So, the combination of those two things, just keep the walks in the 2s at least. If you can get down on the 1s, lovely. I'm a big fan.
How much is Zach Eflin being overdrafted? Because I always kind of like Zach, usually at the price he goes at, too.
I like him, too. I think some of the issue here is probably the fences being moved in Baltimore. I think that's going to help right-handed hitters quite a bit. It was a fairly sizable move.
Yeah.
We have him in the mid 24th round.
Certainly hurt him when it went the other way.
Well, yeah. I mean, that hurt guys like Mountcastle and, Kobe Mayo came up and struggled. I would love to see him make the team. I can't believe he didn't make the team.
I know.
It just feels like he actually came out and said, it's a lose-lose for me. If I go down there and play well, I was supposed to. And if I go down there and struggle, then I shouldn't have been up anyway. So it's like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking. But I also think that Ryan Mountcastle might be a little underdrafted at this point.
Well, yeah. I mean, now that it looks like his playing time is secure, certainly. But I'm really questioning what the Orioles are doing. I mean, this is their window, and they're doing nothing.
Yeah.
That I don't understand. Your window does not last forever. It's almost always smaller than you think it is.
Oh,
so
funny.
Why are you just letting these guys languish and not using them as trade chips or pushing them up?
But this is what and I'll use the term we loosely again, because I don't know if you were on board. This is why we criticized the Yankees with Anthony Volpe at the time. It's like, why bring him up this early? Why force him? And I think that's kind of what they're doing with Mayo. It's like, get him down, put him down, let him play every day, let him get his confidence, and he's going to be fine. It's just like, let's give him a chance to get his footing underneath him. I understand it to an extent, but you're right. This is their window. Play the kid. Let him work it out up here, by the way. That's what last year was for him to work it out.
Especially when you move the fences in. I mean, he's one of the couple guys that really will benefit from that, the way that he hits.
Yep.
So it looks like you made a change to specifically benefit him and then set him down. Like, I just don't get it.
And you've got this kid talking already, which means you're messing with his head, which is not a healthy situation.
Well, and actually, I didn't look. I'm going to look real quick how he did in AAA last year. But if I'm not mistaken, he hit well.
I'm sure he did.
Let's see what we had at AAA last year. 293, 372, 592 in 400 plate appearances. So, yeah, he hit well.
Yeah.
An ISO of 300. He has nothing left to prove there.
And again, the reason you wouldn't keep him on and let him work it out at the major league level is you don't want to mess with his head, but clearly you've messed with his head by sending him down.
Obviously. And you know what? If he's saying something publicly, it's
Exactly.
not the first thing he said.
Yeah, no,
So,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a pretty clear example that this got under his skin a little bit.
Yep. But this was the problem, right? Like we talked about this last year. They had too many mouths to feed. So the thing to do was figure out a way to make a deal to get some pitching, which they have none of.
Yeah.
And they did nothing. So now they're pissing off their young players. The team isn't better. What are they doing?
Yeah, that's what they should have done at the deadline last year. Move off some of that young talent to get some pitching. And by the way, with Burns being gone, that kind of closed the window on them. It's almost like panic to an extent. They don't really know how to play this at this point, whether they're going to play as the window being open or the window being closed.
Why didn't you go back and sign Flaherty again? I mean, he went under market value to the Tigers because he basically didn't get interest enough elsewhere. He looked like a great fit for Baltimore.
Oh, I just bitched and moaned so much when the Red Sox didn't sign Flaherty. I mean, that seemed like a no-brain signing.
He's a good pitcher.
He's a damn good
better than all these guys we're talking about.
Yep. And by the way, I don't think the Yankees overpaid Fried at all. I think that was a real good price for Fried. I kind of like that contract.
I think it was an excellent price. Yankee fans hated it. I was like, what are you talking about? You have no idea.
No.
He's a great fit for that park, and he's an excellent pitcher. As sound fundamentally, I mean, I know he's had a few lower leg injuries, but the arm is pretty sound. Yep. I feel like it's a good bet, and man, he's going to have to hold the thing together this year. They need to make an acquisition.
2 years from now, that's going to be a bargain contract. It's going to be an absolute bargain contract.
I want them to send like Will Warren and I don't know, pick an outfield prospect, Pereira, or you can even maybe consider Dominguez and trade for Christopher Sanchez. He'd be an ideal fit for that park. And I don't think maybe Philly appreciates it. I don't know. Fans don't seem to.
That's what we take away this year, right? It's like you like Christopher Sanchez quite a bit.
I love him. I think he's vastly underdrafted. Might be the biggest underdraft.
How about Jesus Luzardo in Philadelphia?
Jesus Luzardo walks too many guys for me to ever be really comfortable with him. And I have him in a couple leagues because the stuff is outstanding. But again, we're getting into a situation where he's been injured so many times. Like, does the stuff start to degrade? And that's all he had going for him because he had no control.
Yep. And we just we never liked those Miami pitchers outside of the ballpark, and now he's pitching in Philadelphia.
Yeah, which is like the opposite end of the spectrum. If you want to put runners on in Philadelphia in that bandbox, good luck.
All right. So where are you valuing Eflin here, and where is the draft advisory program valuing him as opposed to ADP?
ADP's 18th, mid 18th round. Draft advisory program has him in the mid 24th round. That late, it's not a gigantic overpay.
Right.
You've got great control, decent ground ball rate, although it was down 7% last year. It was still in the 40s, so it's decent. Above average exit velocity allowed. Velo's down 4 years in a row, though, and that it's starting to show in the swinging strike rate. That dropped under 10% last year, which is well below average at this point. Average is about 11. So, 380 xFIP. Eflin's probably better than a bunch of guys that were on this list, and he's being drafted later than all but Ronald Blanco. I like Eflin. I'm fine with him as like a fourth or fifth starter. Expecting him to go back to his peak probably that ship has sailed. I think there's been enough degradation in raw arm talent that he's more of just a kind of ground ball, no walks guy, and you hope you get 6 innings, 3 runs out of him.
It's the strikeout rate, right? That's what
It's
suppresses
too low.
value in terms of the draft advisory program. Because again, at what he posted last year at 7.2 per 9 or 7.3 per 9, it was close enough. We'll round it up to there. Not quite enough for me. Not enough where I'm comfortable. Even though he doesn't walk guys, he keeps the ball in the ballpark. He keeps the ball on the ground. He does quality of contact is pretty good. I still want a little bit more, and he's exhibited more in the past. So I'm not sure what happens, but I'm just not comfortable with that strikeout rate.
Yeah, I'm with you, and especially making the move to Baltimore, which is probably going to be a significant hitter's park again, I think, with these new fences. I'm not enamored. If he's my last starter, fine. Otherwise, I'm just probably going to go with somebody with a little more upside.
Last starter, like reserve last starter.
Yeah.
No, he's a good guy to have on the staff at this point, and you get to a certain point where he's useful because he's pitched well despite his limitations on swing and miss, despite his limitations, because he keeps the ball on the ground and doesn't walk guys.
He's a savvy pitcher. He's been around.
And again, he's one of those guys. If he's the last guy on your staff, you're picking starts for him, and you put him in good situations, and he's going to do well.
Yeah, I mean, even with that ground ball rate, he's still reasonably hittable, and I wouldn't want to be using him against the Dodgers as an example.
All right, that's it for us. We're going to be looking again during the weekend. We'll talk about Sky's Tout Wars auction. We'll talk about auction strategy a little bit and get into some more players as we get you ready for your final drafts of the preseason here. Baseball's almost here, Sky. Actually, it's here. It's here in Japan anyway.
Did you watch either game?
I did not watch either game. 6 a.m? No, I'm not doing that.
I watched a little bit on my phone from bed, and then while I was getting my day ready and making coffee and stuff, but I never actually turned it on.
All right, everybody head over to insiderbaseball.com. Check out the baseball blog, which is free to non-subscribers. If you're not there yet and you're drafting, get your draft advisory program. Go check out all the features of it. And if you're a returning customer, get it downloaded and get it going. Get the updates going and get ready for your drafts as you're heading into this final week or two of drafts here in fantasy baseball. Sky, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you over the weekend.
All right, buddy. Sounds good. Have a good one.
All right, I stopped the music for some reason. I got to start the music again. All right, we'll talk to you next weekend.
Yeah. Let's go. Oh, yeah. Let's go. Hey, 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 hey. Yo.